Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Meg Mayo-Brown, Superintendent of Schools for Barnstable, with an update for you on where we are in the process of designing the reopening of Barnstable Public Schools for the fall. On May 28th, we launched a reopening steering committee and various task force subcommittees to begin scenario planning for a fall reopening. Those task force subcommittees are working on areas to include curriculum and instruction, the physical learning environment, operations, meaning bus transportation, school meals, behavioral health, special education, educator and staff support, COVID-19 protocols, and co-curricular activities. While our task force subcommittees were scenario planning, we knew we were waiting for some guidance from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education on school reopening. And we also knew that we were anticipating some mandates in terms of a requirement to reopen our schools, particularly for in-person learning. That guidance came on June 25th with a subsequent frequently asked question guide on July 9th. Both of those documents are available on our website if anyone would like to read them in their entirety. I would certainly encourage folks to read the July 9th frequently asked question guide. I think it gives a good overview of what the expectations are for schools in the Commonwealth. When that guidance was released, the Commissioner of Education also created the expectation that in the context of prioritizing in-person learning for all students, that districts engage in a feasibility study to determine how many students could come back to in-person learning with physical distancing requirements in place. We are in the process of finalizing our feasibility study for Barnstable schools, and we will submit that as required by July 31st to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. In just a bit, I'll tell you where we are in terms of what we learned by our feasibility study. We continue to draft our reopening plans. We're just about at the point where we're going to start collecting broader feedback and input on our reopening plans. The state has created, again, the expectation that every district in the Commonwealth develop 3 plans, one for in-person, one for a hybrid model of learning, and one for remote learning. We're planning on, again, soliciting some feedback and input from all of our stakeholders about what our planning is in those 3 areas. We plan to submit the plan, our reopening plan, to the school committee at their next meeting, which is August 5th. The school committee will be reviewing the plan, discussing the plan, and potentially approving the plan with or without modifications in order to submit the plan to the Commissioner of Education for approval by August 10th. So as I mentioned, every district in the state is planning 3 models of learning: an in-person model with health and safety measures in place, a hybrid model where students attend in-person on predetermined days with remote learning on non-in-person days, and then a remote learning option where students receive 100% of their instruction remotely or online. I do want to note that parents and guardians will have the option to select remote only. We will survey our parents in coming weeks to see what the preference is in terms of in-person versus remote, so that we know how to best plan moving forward. I just want to walk everyone through where we are in our thinking by grade span. So Ena Cobb Early Learning Center is our preschool, serving well over 200 students. Many of the students are students with disabilities. We are currently and remain in the planning process for Ena Cobb. As those plans get formalized, we will share them with with a broader audience. For students at Hyannis West, Centerville, West Villages, Barnstable Community Innovation School, and BWB, these are our K through 3 third grade schools. We are able to prioritize in-person learning for those schools by implementing 6 feet of physical distancing and requiring masks for all adults and students in grades 2 through 3. The state guidance says that students in grades 2 and above are required to wear masks, and students below those grade levels are encouraged but not required. As we open schools for in-person learning at that grade, for those grade levels, our K-1 students will not be required to wear masks all day long. Rather, our teachers at those grade levels will be working with students to build the expectation of the healthy habit around mask wearing, and our teachers will determine times during the course of the school day where they can begin to developmentally work with students and build up the expectation around mask wearing for our youngest learners. I'm going to group Barnstable United Elementary, Barnstable Intermediate School, and Barnstable High School all together. Due to the size of enrollment at each of those schools and the physical distancing requirements, we cannot bring back all students to in-person learning at once. We have to implement a hybrid model at those 3 schools so that we would have students in cohorts where some students would attend in person while others are learning remotely. More about that in just a bit. But to review before I leave this slide, the state guidance is prioritizing in-person learning, certainly prioritizing in-person learning for our students with disabilities and our English language learner students. We're in the process of finalizing our feasibility study for in-person learning, and we must submit a plan for in-person, hybrid, and remote to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education by August 10th. And finally, as I've noted here on the bottom, families will have the option to select remote-only instruction in lieu of any of the in-person hybrid models you see above. So what do we mean when we say hybrid or blended learning? Again, for these 3 school sites, they will need to be, because of capacity issues, they will need to be in a hybrid learning mode. So that means we're going to take our students and put them into separate cohorts. So students are placed into cohorts to reduce the number of students that are present in the building at any one time. So envision that we have a cohort A of students and a cohort B. Cohort A will attend in person, for example, for the week, while cohort B is learning remotely for that week. Then the following week, they switch. Cohort B comes in for in-person learning, while cohort A learns remotely. Now we're still looking at models, whether it's week on, week off, or day on, day off. We have yet to finalize that, and we'll be soliciting feedback and input around those models as well. You'll hear us talk about synchronous learning and asynchronous learning in hybrid models. So when students are learning remotely, there's the possibility to learn in a synchronous fashion. That means instruction is occurring at a specific time, and students need to sign on or sign in remotely to that instruction. Where asynchronous is different. Students are assigned work or learning. They kind of go through it at a self-directed pace, but they're aware of a deadline where that the teacher has established where they need to submit their work. So we heard from our survey that parents wanted more synchronous learning opportunities for their children. So we are looking at models of a combination of synchronous and asynchronous. And again, as we do more, as our plans sort of firm up about that, we'll be soliciting some additional feedback to see if we're on the right track with the ratio between synchronous and asynchronous. And then our guiding principles for reopening in person. Absolutely, priority on health and safety is guiding our reopening plans. So again, what you see here on this list is what is articulated in the guidance that came out from the state, where all students are required in grades 2 through 12 to wear a mask unless it's medically not possible or behaviorally not appropriate. We'll encourage masks for grades preschool through grade 1, again, with our educators working with our youngest students to develop that healthy habit of mask wearing at developmentally appropriate times with a longer term goal of more consistent mask wearing at those grade levels. All adults in schools are required to wear masks, including adults on buses. And I should note here that children, regardless of their grade level will be required to wear masks at all times on buses. We're going to provide opportunities for frequent hand washing and sanitizing. We're going to implement physical distancing to protect our students and staff. We're going to use that cohort grouping model that I talked about in order to, again, we can't safely have all kids in buildings at one time. We're going to need to break them up into cohorts to have them come in. We're going to implement our COVID-19 protocols for transitions. Think of hallway passing as an example, meals, cleaning, disinfecting, materials, and many, many more. I have just too many to list here in this bullet. And certainly prioritizing staying home for our students and staff when sick or when exhibiting any symptoms. Our next steps, we're going to meet with our Parent Caregiver Advisory Committee on reopening for their feedback and input. This advisory committee was just launched. These are parents were invited who currently sit on school councils to join us on an advisory committee as an initial way to collect feedback and input around our reopening plans. This group will also be asked to give their input on survey items. We know we need to survey our families to find out where everyone is in terms of their thinking on what option is their preference, whether it's remote only or whether it's a in-person hybrid model. So that should be coming out in the not too distant future. We're going to analyze our transportation survey results that we're just getting in. We're analyzing staff survey results that were just completed last week. We're going to continue to meet with our Barnesville Teachers Association to work collaboratively to figure out the best way to reopen. We're determining our cohort models. I do want to sort of make a note here. I talked about cohort A and cohort B, but there will also be a cohort C. And cohort C will be for students who we know need daily in-person instruction. So again, cohort A comes in for predetermined days. Cohort B will be in for predetermined days. But cohort C, we're hoping that we can develop a plan where cohort C students are in daily for instruction to as much as possible or feasible. And then you should expect from us that we're going to be communicating weekly as our plans become more formal and finalized, and as we're incorporating feedback and input into those reopening plans. And as I close here, I do want to say that this is a very fluid situation. The plans that I can describe to you today may change based on new information from the state, but please know we're relying on the state guidance as well as guidance from the medical community, the public health community, and others as we figure out in a very fluid situation how we can reopen schools. But do know that our priority is the health and safety of our students and of our staff as we develop these plans that I always have to say are subject to change based on new information that may be coming to us. So thank you very much for your patience and tolerance as we work to figure out what is possible for Barnesville Public Schools. And I look forward to connecting with everyone next week with another update.